Sarah Martinez stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching the city below bustling with afternoon traffic. At 42, she had built Martinez Tech from a small startup in her garage to one of the most successful software companies in the country. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her sharp business suit reflected the confidence she had earned through years of hard work and determination. The intercom buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. "Ms. Martinez, there's been another incident." Her assistant's voice carried a note of concern that made Sarah's stomach tighten. She pressed the button. "Send me the details." Within minutes, Sarah was staring at photos on her computer screen that made her blood run cold. Her 17-year-old daughter Emma's car had been followed again, this time by two men on motorcycles who had tried to force her off the road. Only quick thinking and her driving instructors. Defensive driving lessons had helped Emma escape to the safety of her private school. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she picked up her phone to call Emma. The girl answered on the first ring, her voice shaky but trying to sound brave. "Mom, I'm okay, really. The security guard here walked me to my car and I drove straight to school. I followed all the protocols you taught me." "Emma, honey, this can't continue. These incidents are getting more serious." Sarah's voice was firm but filled with motherly concern. "I'm hiring professional security for you." "Mom, no. I don't want some scary bodyguard following me around school. My friends already think our family is weird because of all the money stuff." Sarah understood her daughter's frustration. Emma was a normal teenager who wanted to live a normal life, but Sarah's success had put them both in the spotlight. Competitors, disgruntled former employees, and even random criminals saw her family as targets. The threatening letters had started 6 months ago, followed by suspicious cars parked near their home and now direct attempts to harm Emma. "This isn't negotiable, sweetheart. Your safety is more important than anything else in this world." After ending the call, Sarah immediately contacted the best private security firm in the city. She had researched them thoroughly after the first threatening letter arrived. Sterling Security Solutions had an impeccable reputation for protecting high-profile clients, especially their families. The next morning, Sarah sat across from Marcus Sterling, the company's owner, in his downtown office. Marcus was a distinguished man in his 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to assess everything around him. "Ms. Martinez, I understand your concerns completely. We've been following the incidents involving your daughter, and I agree that immediate protection is necessary." Marcus opened a thick folder on his desk. "I have the perfect candidate for this assignment." Sarah leaned forward, her business instincts fully engaged. "Tell me about them." "His name is Jake Thompson, 28 years old, former Army Special Forces with multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. He's been working private security for 3 years now, specifically protecting the children of high-profile clients. What makes him perfect for your daughter is his age and approach to the job." Marcus handed her a professional photograph. Sarah found herself looking at a young man with kind eyes and a gentle smile that contrasted with his obviously strong build. Something about his face seemed familiar, but she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. "Jake doesn't look like a typical bodyguard, which is exactly what we want for Emma. He can blend in as a college student, a friend's older brother, or even a tutor if needed. He's trained in psychology as well as combat, so he understands how to protect young people without making them feel like prisoners." Sarah studied the resume Marcus provided. Jake's military record was impressive, with commendations for bravery and leadership. His private security work showed a pattern of successful long-term assignments protecting teenagers and young adults. "Has he worked with reluctant clients before?" Sarah asked, thinking of Emma's resistance to having a bodyguard. Marcus smiled. "That's actually his specialty. Last year he protected a senator's daughter who was equally opposed to security. By the end of the assignment, she considered him one of her best friends. Jake has a gift for earning trust while maintaining professional boundaries." "What's his background? Where is he from?" "He grew up in a military family, moved around a lot as a child. Lost both parents in a car accident when he was 19, which is when he enlisted. The military became his family and his fellow soldiers became his brothers. He's particularly motivated to protect others because he understands what it's like to lose the people you love." Sarah felt a pang of sympathy. She had built her company partly to ensure Emma would never face the financial struggles Sarah had experienced growing up in a single-parent household. When can he start? He's available immediately. In fact, he's already begun preliminary surveillance of your daughter's routes and daily patterns. With your permission, I'd like to arrange a meeting between the three of you tomorrow evening. Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. She was grateful to have found someone who seemed perfect for protecting Emma, but she worried about how her independent daughter would react to having a constant companion. That evening, Sarah sat Emma down in their home's comfortable living room. The house was a reflection of Sarah's success but still felt warm and lived in, with family photos covering the mantelpiece and Emma's art projects from years past still decorating the refrigerator. I met with the security company today. They've assigned someone specifically to protect you, and I think you'll like him. Emma rolled her eyes dramatically. Mom, I told you I don't want some big scary guy following me around. Jake isn't big and scary. He's 28 and he's trained to blend in. The security company says he's very good at working with people your age. 28? That's not that much older than me. What if my friends think he's my boyfriend or something? That would be so embarrassing. Sarah couldn't help but smile at her daughter's typical teenage concerns. We'll figure out a cover story that works for you. Maybe he's a tutor or a family friend helping out. The important thing is that you'll be safe. Emma was quiet for a moment, then asked, What if I don't like him? Then we'll find someone else. But I want you to give him a chance first. Meet him tomorrow night, talk to him, and then we'll decide together. As Sarah tucked Emma into bed that night, she felt hopeful for the first time in months. Soon her daughter would have professional protection, and Sarah could focus on running her company without constantly worrying about Emma's safety. She had no idea that hiring Jake Thompson would bring a ghost from her past back into her life in the most unexpected way. The next evening, Jake Thompson stood outside the Martinez family's impressive home in the exclusive Hillcrest neighborhood. The two-story house was elegant but not ostentatious, with warm lights glowing in the windows and a well-maintained garden that spoke of a family that valued both success and comfort. Jake checked his appearance one more time in the side mirror of his car. He wore dark jeans and a casual button-down shirt, looking more like a graduate student than a former Special Forces soldier. His approach to protection was always the same: blend in, build trust, and keep the client safe without making them feel like they were living in a prison. As he walked up the front steps, memories of his military service flashed through his mind. He had seen too many good people hurt because they didn't have proper protection. That experience had driven him to this career, where he could use his skills to keep families safe in a different way. Sarah answered the door herself, and Jake was struck by how much more relaxed she looked than in the professional photos he had seen. She wore jeans and a comfortable sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, and her smile was genuinely warm. You must be Jake. Please come in. I'm Sarah Martinez. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. I'm looking forward to meeting Emma and discussing how we can work together to keep her safe. As they walked into the living room, Jake noticed the family photos scattered throughout the house. There were pictures of Emma at various ages, Sarah receiving business awards, and vacation photos that showed a close mother-daughter relationship. It was clear this was a loving home, which made Jake even more determined to protect it. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, moving slowly as if she was being forced to attend a dentist appointment. She was prettier than her photos suggested, with her mother's dark hair and intelligent eyes, but her expression was guarded and slightly hostile. Emma, this is Jake Thompson, Sarah said gently. Jake, my daughter Emma. Jake had learned from experience that teenagers responded better to honesty and respect than to adults who tried too hard to be cool. He extended his hand with a genuine smile. Hi, Emma. I know you're not thrilled about this whole bodyguard situation. I get it. If I were 17 and someone told me I needed protection, I'd probably be pretty annoyed too. Emma shook his hand, looking slightly surprised by his directness. So you're not going to pretend this is going to be fun? Nope. Having a bodyguard isn't fun even when you get along with the person. But it doesn't have to be miserable either. My job is to keep you safe while making sure you can still live your life as normally as possible. The three of them sat down, and Sarah began explaining the security concerns that had led to this decision. Jake watched Emma's face as her mother described the escalating incidents. He saw fear flicker in the teenager's eyes, quickly covered by typical adolescent bravado. The men who followed you yesterday were professionals, Jake said quietly. They knew your route, your timing, and they had planned their approach. This isn't some random thing that's going to go away on its own. Emma was silent for a moment, then asked, "What would happen if they actually caught me?" Jake appreciated her directness. Best case scenario, they'd demand ransom money from your mom. Worst case, they might hurt you to make a point, or even kill you if they thought it would send a message to other successful business people. Sarah winced at his bluntness, but Jake knew that sugarcoating the danger wouldn't help Emma understand why protection was necessary. "So what would you actually do? Follow me around school like some creepy older guy?" Jake laughed, and Emma seemed surprised by how natural and comfortable the sound was. "That would definitely be creepy and pretty ineffective. Here's what I'm thinking. I enroll in some college classes at the community college near your school. I become the college guy who's working part-time as a tutor for your family. When you're at school, I'm nearby but not obvious. When you're going places after school, I'm your ride. You'd drive me places? If you want. Or I could follow behind in my own car, whatever makes you more comfortable. The goal is to make sure you're never alone and vulnerable, but also to make sure your friends don't think you're weird or different." Emma considered this, and Jake could see her practical mind working through the implications. "What if I want to go out with friends? Like to the movies or the mall? Then we go to the movies or the mall. I might sit a few rows behind you or browse in stores nearby. Your friends probably won't even notice me. What if I want to date someone?" Sarah looked uncomfortable with this line of questioning, but Jake answered easily. "Then you date someone. I'll do a background check on the guy first, make sure he's not dangerous, and I'll be around but not obvious about it." For the first time, Emma smiled slightly. "You'd investigate my dates?" "Absolutely. Think of it as having a very thorough older brother who wants to make sure you don't end up with jerks." Sarah watched this interaction with growing relief. Emma was responding to Jake in a way she hadn't expected. The teenager seemed to be relaxing, seeing Jake as a person rather than just an unwanted security measure. "What about privacy?" Emma asked. "I mean, are you going to report everything I do to my mom?" Jake looked between mother and daughter, understanding that this was a crucial question. "My job is to keep you safe, not to spy on you. If you're doing normal teenager things that don't put you in danger, that's between you and your mom. If you're doing something that could get you hurt or killed, then yes, I'll intervene and probably tell your mother." "What counts as dangerous? Sneaking out at night alone? Meeting strangers you've talked to online? Going to parties in bad neighborhoods or with people I haven't checked out? Using drugs or drinking because that makes you vulnerable and impairs your judgment?" Emma nodded, seeming to find this reasonable. "And if I don't like how this is working out? Then you tell me and we figure out how to adjust things. Or if it's really not working, your mom finds someone else. The point is to protect you, not to make your life miserable." Sarah had been quiet during most of this exchange, but now she spoke up. "Jake, what's your background? How long have you been doing this kind of work?" As Jake began describing his military service and transition to private security, he noticed Sarah studying his face with an odd expression. Something about her intense gaze made him slightly uncomfortable, though he couldn't figure out why. "Did you serve in Afghanistan?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Yes, ma'am. 2 tours there, 1 in Iraq." "When were you in Afghanistan?" "My first tour was 2018 to 2019. Second was 2020 to 2021. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could see her mind working through something. Emma looked between her mother and Jake, sensing some undercurrent she didn't understand. "Mom, what's wrong?" Emma asked. Sarah shook her head slowly. "Nothing, sweetheart. Jake, you look familiar somehow. I'm trying to figure out where I might have seen you before." Jake studied Sarah's face, but he was certain he had never met her before this assignment. He had an excellent memory for faces, especially civilians he might have encountered during his military service. "I don't think we've met before. Ms. Martinez, I would definitely remember." But even as he said it, something about Sarah's voice stirred a memory he couldn't quite grasp. There was something familiar about her presence, something that made him feel oddly nostalgic and grateful, though he couldn't identify why. The meeting ended with Emma agreeing to give the arrangement a trial period of 2 weeks. Jake would start the next Monday, beginning with driving Emma to school and staying nearby throughout the day. As he left the Martinez home that evening, Jake felt confident that this assignment would go smoothly. Emma was intelligent and reasonable, Sarah was supportive, and the family seemed genuinely caring. He had no idea that within days, a chance conversation would unlock memories that would change everything he thought he knew about this job and the woman who had hired him. Monday morning arrived with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Jake had spent the weekend studying Emma's schedule, mapping out her school routes and identifying potential security risks. He arrived at the Martinez house at 7:30, dressed in jeans and a college sweatshirt that made him look like any other young man starting his day. Emma came out of the house carrying a backpack and a coffee mug, looking more resigned than angry. She had clearly thought about their conversation over the weekend and decided to make the best of the situation. "Morning," she said, getting into Jake's car. "So how does this work? Do we pretend to be friends or relatives or what?" "Whatever feels most natural to you," Jake replied, starting the engine. "If anyone asks, I'm a family friend who's helping out with rides while your car is in the shop. Sound okay? My car isn't actually in the shop. It will be this afternoon. Your mom's having some additional security features installed and the mechanic is going to take his time with the work." Emma looked impressed despite herself. "You guys really thought this through." The drive to Westfield Preparatory Academy took 15 minutes through tree-lined streets in one of the city's safest neighborhoods. Jake used the time to get a better sense of Emma's personality and daily concerns. "Tell me about your friends. Who do you usually hang out with?" "My best friend is Chloe Anderson. Her dad owns those fancy restaurants downtown. Then there's Marcus Kim. He's really good at math and helps me with calculus. And Jessica Santos, she's the editor of the school newspaper." Jake made mental notes about each name. He would do background checks on all of Emma's close friends, not because he suspected them of anything, but because he needed to know who belonged in Emma's circle and who might be an outsider trying to get close to her. "Any boyfriends I should know about?" Emma blushed slightly. "There's this guy Tyler. We've been texting, but we haven't actually gone out or anything. He's on the soccer team." "Tyler what?" "Tyler Matthews. He's a senior, really sweet. He wants to ask me to the homecoming dance next month." Jake made another mental note. Tyler Matthews would get a very thorough background check before Emma went anywhere alone with him. They arrived at Westfield Prep, an impressive campus with brick buildings, manicured lawns, and a parking lot full of expensive cars. Jake noticed immediately how open and accessible the school was. Anyone could walk onto the campus without much difficulty, which was both typical for private schools and a significant security concern. "I'll be around, but you probably won't see me much during school hours," Jake told Emma as she gathered her things. "I've got some classes starting tomorrow at the community college, so I'll be legitimately busy. But I'll know where you are, and I'll be close if anything happens." Emma nodded and headed toward the school building. Jake watched her go, noting the easy way she interacted with other students and the obvious affection her friends had for her. She was popular without being mean, confident without being arrogant. He could see why someone might target her, not just for her mother's money, but because she represented everything good about privilege used responsibly. Jake spent the morning familiarizing himself with the area around the school. He identified the best vantage points for surveillance, the quickest routes to and from the campus, and potential escape routes if a situation went bad. He also enrolled in 2 classes at Pacific Community College, maintaining his cover story while actually learning something useful. That afternoon, he picked Emma up without incident. She seemed more relaxed, chatting about her day as they drove home. "Chloe thinks you're cute," Emma said with a grin. "She wants to know if you're single," Jake laughed. "Tell Chloe I'm flattered, but I'm too old for her and too busy with work to date anyone right now." "Are you really too busy, or is that just an excuse?" Jake considered the question seriously. "Mostly too busy. This job requires complete focus. If I'm distracted by my own relationships, I might miss something important that could put you in danger." "That sounds lonely." "Sometimes it is, but I knew what I was signing up for when I chose this career." When they arrived at the Martinez house, Sarah was waiting in the driveway, having arrived home early from work. She approached the car with a smile, but Jake noticed she studied his face again with that same puzzling intensity he had seen during their first meeting. "How did the first day go?" Sarah asked. "Great," Emma replied before Jake could answer. "He's much less annoying than I expected." "Thanks for that ringing endorsement," Jake said dryly. Making Emma laugh, Sarah invited Jake inside for coffee, and the 3 of them sat in the kitchen discussing how the security arrangement would work long-term. Jake outlined his plans for the coming weeks, including the background checks on Emma's friends and his college class schedule. "You're being very thorough," Sarah observed. "Thorough keeps people alive," Jake replied simply. In my experience, the details matter more than the big gestures. Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more closely. You sound like you learned that lesson the hard way. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about friends he had lost in Afghanistan, soldiers who might still be alive if someone had paid attention to the small details that seemed unimportant at the time. In the military, you learn that overconfidence and assumptions get people killed. I'd rather be overly cautious and have everyone go home safe at the end of the day. Sarah nodded slowly. Were you ever in a situation where small details saved someone's life? The question was oddly specific, and Jake found himself studying Sarah's face as carefully as she was studying his. There was something in her expression, a kind of hopeful anticipation that made him think she was asking about more than just general military experience. Once, he said carefully, there was a situation where a civilian was in serious trouble, and paying attention to details made the difference between life and death. Sarah's breath caught almost imperceptibly. Emma, who had been half listening while texting on her phone, looked up at the sudden tension in the room. What kind of situation? Sarah asked quietly. Jake felt an odd reluctance to discuss the memory, though he wasn't sure why. It had been one of the most meaningful moments of his military career, but also one of the most painful. There was a vehicle accident. An IED had damaged a convoy, and there was a civilian who had been helping our unit. She was trapped in a burning vehicle and everyone else was either dead or unconscious. The details mattered because I had to figure out how to get her out before the fuel tank exploded. Sarah had gone very still, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. Emma was watching both adults with growing confusion, sensing that something important was happening but not understanding what. Did you save her? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. Barely, but yes. She had burns on her arms and a concussion, but she survived. Sarah set down her coffee mug with shaking hands. Jake was watching her face, and suddenly a memory began to surface from deep in his mind. A memory of dark hair matted with blood, intelligent eyes filled with pain and fear, a woman's voice saying thank you over and over as he carried her away from the burning wreckage. What was her name? Sarah asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. I never knew her full name. She was a contractor, working with some kind of technology company that was helping set up communication systems for local schools. Everyone just called her Sarah. The kitchen fell completely silent. Emma was staring at her mother with wide eyes, beginning to understand that something extraordinary was happening. Sarah stood up slowly, rolling up the sleeves of her sweater. On her left forearm were several pale scars, faded but still visible. Burn scars that matched exactly what Jake would expect to see on someone who had been pulled from a burning vehicle. My name is Sarah Martinez, she said quietly, but 3 years ago my name was Sarah Chen. I was working for Martinez Tech, but I hadn't changed my name yet after my divorce. I was in Afghanistan setting up educational technology systems in rural schools. Jake stared at the scars, then at Sarah's face, and suddenly the memory came flooding back in perfect detail. The explosion, the screaming, the race against time to pull an unconscious woman from a vehicle that was about to explode, the long wait at the field hospital while doctors worked to save her life, the brief conversation they had shared before she was evacuated to Germany, where she had thanked him and promised she would never forget what he had done. You're the woman from the convoy, he whispered, and you're the soldier who saved my life. The revelation hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Emma looked between her mother and Jake, her mouth slightly open in amazement. Sarah's eyes were filled with tears she was trying hard not to shed, while Jake sat frozen in his chair, overwhelmed by the impossibility of the coincidence. Mom, Emma said slowly, you never told me about this. You said you were hurt in an accident, but you never said someone saved your life. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, never taking her gaze off Jake. I didn't want to worry you with the details. You were only 14 and I was trying to protect you from knowing how close I came to dying. Jake found his voice, though it came out rougher than usual. I remember now. You kept asking about your laptop. Even when you were barely conscious, you were worried about losing your work files. A laugh escaped Sarah's lips, watery but genuine. Those files contained 3 months of research on educational software implementation. I was terrified that losing them would set back the entire project. You also kept apologizing for causing trouble, even though the attack had nothing to do with you. I felt so guilty. My security team had warned me that the route was dangerous, But I insisted we take it because it would save time getting to the school site. Emma was shaking her head in disbelief. This is incredible. I mean, what are the odds? Out of all the security companies in the city, out of all the bodyguards they could have assigned, Mom ends up hiring the exact person who saved her life? Jake was struggling with the same question. In his experience, coincidences this massive didn't just happen. Sarah, did you know? When you hired Sterling Security, did you request me specifically? No, Sarah said quickly. I swear I had no idea. Marcus Sterling recommended you based on your qualifications and experience with teenage clients. I thought you looked familiar when I saw your photo, but I couldn't place where I'd seen you. Jake studied her face, using skills learned in military interrogations to detect deception. But everything about Sarah's expression and body language suggested she was telling the truth. Her surprise seemed as genuine as his own. The convoy attack, Jake said slowly, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. You said you were working for Martinez Tech, but your name was Sarah Chen. Chen was my married name. After my divorce, I changed it back to Martinez, which was my maiden name. I had founded Martinez Tech years earlier, but I was running the international operations personally because the Afghanistan project was so important to me. You were already a CEO when you were in Afghanistan. Sarah nodded. The company was much smaller then, but yes, the educational technology project was something I felt passionate about. I wanted to help bring modern communication and learning tools to schools that had been cut off from the world for decades. Emma was listening to this conversation with fascination. She had always known her mother was successful, but hearing about her actually risking her life to help schools in a war zone revealed a side of Sarah that Emma had never fully understood. What happened after you were evacuated? Jake asked. I tried to find out, but patient information was classified. I spent 2 weeks in a military hospital in Germany, then another month recovering in a private facility in Switzerland. The burns were worse than they initially thought, and I had some internal injuries from the blast. But the doctors said if you had taken even 30 seconds longer to get me out of that vehicle, I wouldn't have survived. Jake remembered the scene vividly now. The metal had been too hot to touch with bare hands, so he had used his jacket to grab the door handle. The woman inside had been unconscious, bleeding from a head wound, her left arm trapped under a piece of twisted dashboard. He had worked frantically to free her while listening to the ominous, creaking sounds that meant the vehicle's fuel system was about to go critical. I remember you woke up, just as I got you clear of the explosion, Jake said. You looked at me and said something, but I couldn't hear you over the noise. I said thank you and asked for your name. You told me. But then the medics took over and I lost consciousness again. When I woke up in the hospital, they told me my rescuer had been transferred to a different base, and they couldn't give me any contact information. I tried to visit you in the hospital, but they said you were in critical condition and only family was allowed. Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears. I looked for you. After I recovered, I spent months trying to find Sergeant Jake Thompson, the soldier who had saved my life. I wanted to thank you properly. Maybe set up a scholarship fund in your honor, something to show how grateful I was. But the military told me you had been transferred and they couldn't release any information about your whereabouts. I left the Army about 6 months after that incident, Jake explained. My enlistment was up and I had decided I wanted to use my skills to protect people in a different way. Emma had been listening to this exchange with growing emotion. Mom, you've been looking for him all this time? Not actively, but I never forgot. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what Jake did for me. Every success I've had since then, every moment I've gotten to spend with you, every opportunity to grow the company and help other people. It all exists because of those few minutes when a stranger risked his life to save mine. Jake felt overwhelmed by the weight of Sarah's gratitude. In the military, saving people was just part of the job. He had never thought of himself as a hero, just as a soldier doing his duty. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly. I was just doing what anyone would have done in that situation. That's not true, Sarah said firmly. The attack killed 3 people and wounded 7 others. You were the only person who went back for the civilians after securing your own team. The military report said you risked court-martial by disobeying orders to retreat. This was news to Emma, who was staring at Jake with new respect. You disobeyed orders to save my mom? Jake shifted uncomfortably. The orders were to secure the immediate area and wait for backup. But I could see that the civilian vehicles were going to explode and I knew there were people still alive inside them. You saved other people too?
I tried.
Your mother was the only one I could reach in time. Sarah leaned forward, her voice intense with emotion. Jake, you gave me my life back. You gave Emma her mother. You made it possible for me to build my company into something that now employs over 3,000 people. The ripple effects of what you did that day have touched thousands of lives. The kitchen fell quiet again, as all three of them processed the magnitude of what had been revealed. The professional relationship between Bodyguard and client had suddenly become something much more complex and emotionally charged. Emma broke the silence with a question that cut straight to the heart of the matter. So what happens now?
I mean, this changes everything, doesn't it?
Emma's question hung in the air, creating a tension that none of them knew how to address. Jake was the first to speak, his military training kicking in to provide structure when emotions threatened to overwhelm the situation. It doesn't change anything about the job, he said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Emma still needs protection, and I'm still the person assigned to provide it. Sarah looked at him with an expression that suggested she disagreed, but before she could respond, Jake's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His expression immediately shifted to high alert as he read the text from his supervisor at Sterling Security. What is it? Sarah asked, recognizing the change in his demeanor. We need to get you both to a secure location. Now. Jake was already standing, his hand moving instinctively toward the weapon concealed under his jacket. Marcus Sterling just got intelligence that there's going to be an attempt on Emma's life tonight. The cozy kitchen atmosphere evaporated instantly. Sarah grabbed Emma's hand while Jake moved to the window, carefully looking out at the street through a gap in the curtains. What kind of attempt? Sarah's business mind was working even through her fear, needing details to understand the threat. A three-man team is planning to grab Emma when she leaves for her evening study group. They've been watching the house for 2 days, learning her patterns. Jake was speaking quickly while continuing to scan the street. Sterling's intelligence contact says they're planning to take her alive, which means ransom. Emma had gone pale, but she wasn't panicking. I don't have a study group tonight. I was going to stay home and work on my history paper. Then they're working with old information, which is good for us. Jake pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Marcus, it's Jake. We're at the house now. I need extraction for 2 civilians, and I need it fast. While Jake coordinated with his backup team, Sarah was processing the implications of what he had told them. Jake, if they've been watching for 2 days, they know your car. They know you're here, which means this might be a trap designed to take out Emma's protection before they make their move. Jake agreed grimly. We need to assume they're out there right now, waiting for the right moment. Emma's composure finally cracked slightly. Are we going to die? Jake turned from the window and looked directly at her, his voice calm and reassuring despite the circumstances. No, not on my watch.
Emma, I saved your mother's life once, and I'm not going to let anything happen to either of you now. The weight of their newly discovered connection added an extra layer of determination to his words.
This wasn't just a professional assignment anymore, though Jake was trying hard not to let his emotions interfere with his judgment. What's the plan? Sarah asked. Sterling is sending a team to create a diversion at the front of the house while we slip out the back. There's a wooded area behind your property that connects to the next street over. We'll extract through there and rendezvous with backup at a safe house across town. Jake moved through the house with practiced efficiency, checking locks and closing curtains while staying away from the windows. Sarah and Emma followed his instructions without question, gathering essential items and preparing for a quick departure. Sarah, I need you to pack a bag with enough clothes for both of you for 3 days. Nothing fancy, just basics. Emma, grab your schoolwork and anything you absolutely can't live without. But keep it to one small bag. As they prepared to leave, Sarah found herself watching Jake with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper that she didn't want to examine too closely. Seeing him in action, protecting her family with the same calm competence he had shown in Afghanistan, brought back all the emotions she had felt during those terrifying moments in the burning vehicle. Jake, she said quietly while Emma was upstairs packing, I know you said this doesn't change anything about the job, but it changes things for me. The idea that the person protecting my daughter is the same person who gave me the chance to be her mother. It means everything. Jake paused in his security preparations, meeting her eyes across the living room. Sarah, I need you to know that my feelings about what happened in Afghanistan won't compromise my ability to protect Emma. If anything, it makes me more determined to keep both of you safe. I know that. I trust you completely. The simple statement carried more weight than either of them wanted to acknowledge. Trust was something that had been earned in fire and blood 3 years ago, and now it was being tested again under very different but equally dangerous circumstances. Emma came downstairs with a small overnight bag, her face showing a mixture of fear and excitement. Despite the danger, there was something almost adventurous about the situation that appealed to her teenage sense of drama. Are we really going to sneak through the woods like spies? We're going to move carefully and quietly through the woods like people who want to stay alive, Jake corrected, but his tone was gentle. Emma, once we start moving, I need you to follow my instructions exactly without questions or arguments. Can you do that? Yes. Jake's phone buzzed with a message from his backup team. They're in position. We move in 2 minutes. He led Sarah and Emma to the back door, explaining the route they would take and what to do if something went wrong. The woods behind the Martinez house were dark and quiet, providing good cover but also potential hiding places for threats. Stay close, stay quiet, and trust me, Jake whispered as he opened the back door. They slipped out into the night, with Jake leading the way and constantly scanning for danger. The moonlight filtered through the trees, providing just enough illumination to navigate the path without using flashlights that might give away their position. Halfway through the woods, Jake suddenly held up his hand for them to stop. He had heard something that didn't belong, a sound that made his military instincts go on high alert. Motioning for Sarah and Emma to crouch behind a large tree, he listened carefully to the darkness around them. Footsteps, at least 2 people, moving through the woods from the direction of the street they were heading toward. The extraction point had been compromised. Jake pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his backup team, then turned to Sarah and Emma with a grim expression. Change of plans. They found our route, Emma whispered. What do we do now? Jake was already calculating alternatives, his mind running through escape routes and defensive positions. The woods that had seemed like salvation a few minutes ago now felt like a trap, but he had been in worse situations in Afghanistan, and he had never lost a person he was protecting. We improvise, he said quietly, and we remember that sometimes the best way out of a trap is to spring it on your own terms. Sarah recognized the look in Jake's eyes. It was the same expression she had seen in the moments before he had risked his life to pull her from the burning vehicle. He was about to do something dangerous, something that would put himself at risk to protect others. Jake, whatever you're thinking, we do it together. You're not sacrificing yourself for us. He looked at her with surprise, then nodded slowly. Together, then. But we do this my way, and everyone follows orders without question. In the darkness of the woods, with danger closing in from multiple directions, the 3 of them prepared to face whatever came next. The connection forged in Afghanistan 3 years ago was about to be tested again, but this time Emma's life hung in the balance along with Sarah's. Jake's mind raced through tactical options as they crouched behind the tree, listening to the footsteps getting closer. The men hunting them were professionals, moving with practiced stealth through the woods. But Jake had one advantage they didn't know about. He was familiar with these woods from his surveillance of the property, and he knew there was an old storm drainage tunnel that ran under the street. There's a drainage system about 50 yards north of here, he whispered to Sarah and Emma. It connects to the storm drains under the main road. We can use it to get past them. Emma looked skeptical. You want us to crawl through sewers? Storm drains, not sewers. And yes, unless you prefer to have a conversation with the armed men who want to kidnap you. Sarah squeezed her daughter's shoulder. We trust Jake. He knows what he's doing. Moving as quietly as possible, Jake led them deeper into the woods, away from the approaching footsteps. The drainage entrance was hidden behind a screen of overgrown bushes, a concrete pipe about 4 feet in diameter that was dry thanks to the recent lack of rain. I'll go first, Jake whispered. Sarah, you're in the middle. Emma, you bring up the rear. If anything happens to me, keep moving toward the street and don't look back. Nothing's going to happen to you, Sarah said firmly, though her voice carried a tremor of fear. Jake squeezed through the opening and began moving through the tunnel, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the way. The concrete was rough and dirty, but the tunnel was structurally sound and led in the right direction. Behind him, he could hear Sarah encouraging Emma as they navigated the cramped space. The teenager was handling the situation better than many adults would have, showing the kind of courage that Jake recognized in her mother. They had been crawling for about 10 minutes when Jake heard voices above them, The kidnappers had found the Martinez house empty and were now searching the surrounding area. Through the storm drain grates above their heads, Jake could see flashlight beams sweeping back and forth. "They're looking for us," one voice said. "Check the neighbors' yards." They couldn't have gotten far. What about the woods? Tommy and Rico are covering that area. If they went that way, we'll have them soon. Jake, Sarah, and Emma froze in place, hardly daring to breathe as the men walked directly over their hiding spot. Emma started to shift position, and a small piece of loose concrete fell with a soft clink. The footsteps above them stopped. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Something from the storm drain." Jake's hand moved to his weapon as he prepared for the possibility that their hiding place had been discovered. But after a long moment, the footsteps resumed their movement away from the drain opening. "Just rats or something. Come on, let's check the next street." They waited until the voices faded completely before continuing through the tunnel. Jake's phone buzzed with a text message from his backup team, but he couldn't risk the light from reading it while they were still in potential danger. Finally, they reached a drainage outlet that opened onto a quiet residential street 3 blocks from the Martinez house. Jake emerged first, scanning the area carefully before helping Sarah and Emma out of the tunnel. They were dirty and tired, but alive and undetected. Jake quickly checked his phone and saw multiple messages from Sterling Security. "The extraction team is 2 blocks away," he told them, "but we need to stay alert until we're in the secure vehicle." As they walked toward the rendezvous point, Emma suddenly grabbed her mother's arm. "Mom, look." 3 men in dark clothing were emerging from the woods across the street, clearly searching for them. One of them was talking into a radio, coordinating with other team members. "Down," Jake hissed, pulling Sarah and Emma behind a parked car. The kidnapping team had anticipated their escape route and positioned people to cover multiple streets. Jake realized that this operation was more sophisticated than he had initially thought. These weren't opportunistic criminals. They were professionals with inside information about Emma's movements and possibly even about the security arrangements. Jake's phone vibrated with an incoming call from Marcus Sterling. He answered in a whisper. "Jake, where are you? We've got eyes on at least 6 hostiles in your area. We're 2 blocks north of the extraction point, pinned down behind a silver sedan. 3 hostiles have visual on the street. Can you move to the alternate location?" Jake looked around, assessing their options. The alternate extraction point was 4 blocks away, which meant crossing 2 open intersections where they would be vulnerable. "Negative. Too much open ground. Then we come to you. Give us 3 minutes to get into position." Jake ended the call and turned to Sarah and Emma. "Help is coming, but we need to stay hidden for a few more minutes." Sarah was watching the men across the street with the analytical mind that had made her a successful CEO. "Jake, they're too organized for this to be random. Someone gave them detailed information about Emma's schedule and our security arrangements." "I was thinking the same thing." Jake had been troubled by how much the kidnappers seemed to know about their plans. Emma looked between her mother and Jake with growing alarm. "Are you saying someone we trust is working with them?" "It's possible," Jake admitted. "Which means we can't trust anyone except the people in this conversation and Marcus Sterling." A black SUV turned onto their street, moving slowly as if the driver was looking for something. Jake tensed, ready to run, but then he recognized the vehicle as one of Sterling Security's armored cars. "That's our ride," he said with relief. The SUV pulled up next to their hiding spot, and Marcus Sterling himself got out of the passenger seat. He was wearing tactical gear and carried himself with the alertness of someone expecting trouble. "Everyone okay?" Marcus asked as Jake, Sarah, and Emma climbed into the vehicle. "Physically, yes," Jake replied, "but we've got a problem. The kidnappers knew too much about our movements and our extraction plans." Marcus's expression darkened. "We suspected as much when they anticipated the alternate route. Someone with access to sensitive information is feeding intelligence to these people." Sarah was holding Emma close, both of them finally allowing themselves to feel the fear they had been suppressing. "How do we figure out who it is?" "Very carefully," Marcus replied. "And in the meantime, we keep you both in a location that only Jake and I know about." As the armored SUV drove through the night toward a safe house across the city, Jake found himself reflecting on the strange turns his life had taken. 24 hours ago, he had been a professional bodyguard taking on a routine assignment. Now he was protecting the woman whose life he had saved in Afghanistan and her daughter, while dealing with a security breach that threatened everything he had worked to build in his civilian career. But looking at Sarah and Emma, seeing the trust in their eyes despite the danger they faced, Jake felt a sense of purpose that went beyond professional duty. These weren't just clients anymore. They were family in the deepest sense of the word, bound together by shared trauma and mutual trust. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a middle-class neighborhood, furnished with basic necessities and equipped with advanced security systems. As they settled in for what might be a long wait, Jake began planning their next moves. "We're going to figure out who's betraying us," he told Sarah and Emma. "And then we're going to make sure this never happens again." Sarah met his eyes across the small living room. "What can we do to help?" "Help me think through everyone who knew about Emma's schedule and our security arrangements. We need to identify the leak before they try again." As they began the process of analyzing who might have access to sensitive information, none of them realized that the betrayal came from much closer to home than they could have imagined. The revelation came at dawn, when Jake was reviewing security footage from the Martinez house on his laptop while Sarah and Emma slept in the safe house bedrooms. Marcus Sterling had sent over surveillance data from the past week, and Jake was methodically analyzing every person who had approached the property. What he found made his blood run cold. In the footage from 3 days earlier, he could clearly see David Chen, Sarah's ex-husband and Emma's father, meeting with 2 men in a car parked across from the house. The conversation lasted 15 minutes, and David handed over what appeared to be documents before the men drove away. Jake cross-referenced the license plate with Sterling Security's database and confirmed his worst suspicions. The car belonged to Vincent Torres, a known criminal who specialized in kidnapping wealthy families for ransom. The man who was supposed to protect Emma was the one who had put her in danger. Jake sat back in his chair, processing the implications. David Chen had maintained visitation rights with Emma despite the divorce, which meant he had detailed knowledge of her schedule and routines. He also had access to information about the family's security arrangements through Emma's casual conversations about her new bodyguard. But why would a father put his own daughter at risk? Jake pulled up the financial records that Sterling Security had compiled on the Chen family. What he found provided the motive. David Chen was nearly $1 million in debt to some very dangerous people. His unsuccessful business ventures and gambling habits had put him in a position where he needed money desperately, and kidnapping his own daughter for ransom from his wealthy ex-wife was his solution. Sarah woke up as Jake was making phone calls to coordinate with law enforcement. She found him in the living room, his face grim with the weight of what he had discovered. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, recognizing his expression. Jake showed her the surveillance footage on his laptop. Sarah's face went through a series of emotions as she watched her ex-husband conspiring with criminals. Disbelief, anger, and finally a deep sadness that cut Jake to the heart. He was going to let them take Emma, she whispered, his own daughter. The plan was probably to stage a rescue after collecting the ransom, Jake said gently. David would be the hero who helped get Emma back, and no one would suspect he was involved. Emma appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of their voices. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair messy from sleep, but her eyes were alert and worried. "What's going on? You both look terrible." Sarah and Jake exchanged glances, neither wanting to be the one to tell Emma that her father had betrayed her, but the teenager was too smart to be protected from the truth for long. "Emma, we found out who was giving information to the kidnappers," Jake said carefully. "Who?" "Your father." Emma stared at him for a long moment, then sank into a chair as the full weight of the revelation hit her. Dad was working with them? He was going to let them kidnap me? Sarah moved to comfort her daughter, but Emma pulled away, her face cycling through the same emotions her mother had experienced. "He needs money," Emma said suddenly. "He's been asking me about Mom's business, about how much money we have, about our security systems. I thought he was just making conversation." "It's not your fault," Jake said firmly. "You had no way of knowing what he was planning." Emma looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "What happens now? Is he going to jail?" "The FBI is handling his arrest," Jake replied. "And the kidnapping team is being rounded up based on information from David's phone records. You're safe now." But Emma didn't look like she felt safe. She looked like a teenager whose world had been turned upside down by the discovery that one of the people she trusted most had been willing to put her in danger for money. Over the next few hours, The safe house became a coordination center for law enforcement activities. FBI agents came and went, taking statements and updating Jake on the arrests of David Chen and his criminal associates. By afternoon, all 6 members of the kidnapping team were in custody, and the immediate threat to Emma's safety was over. But the emotional aftermath was just beginning. Sarah sat with Emma on the couch, both of them trying to process what David's betrayal meant for their family. Jake watched them from across the room, feeling like an intruder on their private grief while also being unable to leave them alone in their pain. "I keep thinking about all the times he asked me questions," Emma said quietly, "about where I went to school, who my friends were, what our house security was like. I thought he was being a good father, staying involved in my life." "He was being a father in his own twisted way," Sarah replied. "David loves you, Emma. He just loves money and his own comfort more." Jake's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Marcus Sterling with an update on the investigation. "All the kidnappers are talking," Marcus reported. "David Chen was almost $2 million in debt to loan sharks who were threatening to kill him if he didn't pay up. The kidnapping was his desperate attempt to get the money he needed. What about Emma's safety going forward? The immediate threat is over, but I'd recommend continuing the security detail for at least another month. David Chen had detailed information about your family, and some of that information might have been shared with other criminal elements." Jake agreed to continue protecting Emma, though he knew the dynamics of the job had changed completely. The professional relationship had evolved into something much more personal and complex. When he ended the call, Sarah was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Jake, I need to ask you something, and I want a completely honest answer." "Okay. Are you staying because this is your job? Or are you staying because of what happened between us in Afghanistan?" Jake considered the question carefully. The honest answer was complicated, involving professional duty, personal gratitude, and feelings he wasn't ready to examine too closely. "Both," he said finally. "My job is to protect Emma, and I take that responsibility seriously regardless of our history. But yes, knowing what you went through because of your work in Afghanistan, seeing how much you've accomplished since then, watching the kind of mother you've become to Emma, it makes this assignment personal in a way that goes beyond professional duty." Sarah nodded slowly. "I was hoping you'd say that because I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" "Come work for me directly. Not as a contractor from Sterling Security, but as head of security for Martinez Tech. It would mean better pay, better benefits, and the chance to protect more than just my family." Emma looked up from her position on the couch, suddenly interested in the conversation. "Would that mean Jake would be around all the time?" "If he wanted to be," Sarah replied, still watching Jake's face for his reaction. Jake felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension at the offer. Working directly for Sarah would mean leaving Sterling Security, where he had built his reputation and found his purpose after leaving the military. But it would also mean staying close to the woman whose life he had saved, and the daughter who had become important to him in her own right. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Take all the time you need," Sarah said. "But Jake, I want you to know that offering you this job isn't just about gratitude for what you did in Afghanistan. It's about trust and competence and the fact that I can't imagine anyone else protecting the people and things that matter most to me." Emma grinned suddenly, the first genuine smile Jake had seen from her since learning about her father's betrayal. "Plus, if you work for Mom, maybe you can teach me some of those special forces skills." "Absolutely not," Sarah and Jake said simultaneously, making Emma laugh. As the sun set over the city, the three of them sat in the safe house talking about the future. The immediate danger was over. David Chen was in custody and the kidnappers were no longer a threat. But the bonds forged in crisis had created something new, a family built not on blood or marriage but on trust, gratitude, and the shared understanding that sometimes the most important relationships begin in the most unexpected ways. Jake looked at Sarah and Emma, thinking about the job offer and what accepting it would mean for all of their lives. 3 years ago, he had pulled a stranger from a burning vehicle in Afghanistan. Today, he was being offered the chance to protect the family that had grown from that moment of crisis and courage. Some coincidences, he realized, weren't coincidences at all. They were simply life-giving people the chance to finish what they had started. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'll take the job." Sarah's smile was radiant and Emma cheered softly. Outside the safe house, the city continued its evening routine. unaware that 3 lives had just been permanently intertwined by a decision that would change everything. The soldier who had once saved a life in a war zone had found his way home to the family he had unknowingly helped create. And for the first time since leaving Afghanistan, Jake Thompson felt like he was exactly where he belonged.